Hello, it's Alex here, also known as Defaultsound, and welcome to the next video in the Vertex Color tutorial series. Today we will be looking at how to create the little tufts of grass to fill our garden and make it a bit more visually interesting. So to create the grass, we're going to first add a plane. And what we're going to do is, we'll just move it up so we can see it. We're going to come into edit mode and we will first scale this along the x-axis to get a slim looking blade of grass, and then select these top vertices here and just move them down the y-axis a bit. And I'm going to add a loop cut in the middle here, and this will give us this top vertice to allow us to get the point of our grass. And then I'm going to select the 4 vertices here so we can add a bit of volume to our grass here to make it look less flat. We can then also add a middle loop cut here. Now you notice, because I'm with this vertex, our loop cut's not completely straight. We can fix this by scaling along the relative axes, so in this case it's the y-axis. So we hit scale y, and if we hit 0, this should align all the vertices perfectly straight. And then what we can do is pull this down on the z-axis or up to add a bit of curvature to our blade of grass here. But we're not going to do that just yet, so we'll just leave that there. I think I'm just going to move everything a little bit down because it's quite big at the moment, and maybe just scale it along the x a bit. I'm then going to come back into object mode, and I'm going to I'm going to come into edit mode. I'm going to select this bottom vertex here, hit Shift S, and I'm going to do cursor to selected, so this will snap our 3D cursor to this vertex. Come back into object mode, and I'm going to use Shift Control Alt C to bring up our set origin menu, and I'm going to select origin to 3D cursor. This will now place our origin at the bottom of our blade of grass, so we can hit Alt G to clear our location on our plane here, or our grass blade, and then hit Shift C to reset our 3D cursor. Now we can rotate our grass blade along the x-axis to make it point straight up. So we hit R, X, and then 90. You may notice it's gone the wrong way, so you just need to be wary of which direction our object is rotating. So I'm going to use -90 to rotate that straight up. And then again, like in the previous video, I'm going to clear or apply the rotation and scale, so now this will be its correct position. I'm then going to add our colors to our grass here. So I'm going to select I'm going to color pick our our colors we used on our plain grass. So I'm going to use this as our base. I hit Shift K to fill. Now at the top of the blade of grass, I want to add a yellowish tint, so a lighter green, like so. And then towards the bottom, I'm going to add a darker tinge. That's a bit brown, so I'm just going to increase the green value. And then in the middle, maybe something a bit lighter. Maybe a bit more value there. Like so. Maybe we just make this a bit lighter as well. Actually, again, you can play around with the colors and experiment with what you think looks nice, but that's roughly pretty good looking bit of grass. I might edit this later to something like that. Actually still not quite happy with this, so it's just because right now we have a limited amount of vertices, so what I'm thinking of doing is actually just adding another loop cut here and then scaling that on the z-axis to make it aligned flat. And then we'll come back into vertex color paint here to give us, let's make that a bit darker, this a bit lighter here, and then we'll have our little yellowy tinge at the top, like that. Yeah, that looks a bit nicer. So once you're happy with that, we can then, I'm going to adjust the scale here because it's still looking a bit too big. So we can just come into edit mode and move our vertices down a bit. Oops. Using B to box select, I can select multiple vertices, like so. Maybe make this a bit shorter and maybe just make it a bit skinnier. Okay, that looks pretty good. And actually this is pointing out a bit too much, so I'll just bring this back a bit. So now we can start duplicating this single piece of grass into little tufts. So what I'm going to do now is select the top vertices and just rotate them using R freely. We could snap it to the x-axis and then just move these vertices down a bit. And what we're trying to achieve here is a little bit of variation. So this grass tuft might be placed in this sort of position. It's looking a bit more natural. We can then select all and hit Shift D, and this will give us a duplicate. Now we hit the if we hit R to rotate and then snap it to the Z, that will keep it in the exact position of our previous grass. And then we can just move this into place, and then maybe move some of these vertices so it doesn't look exactly the same as our previous piece of grass. And then we can select all again, duplicate, snap to rotate on the Z axis, and then move our grass into position. And do the same again, just make small manipulations to the blades so they don't all look the same. Again, by manipulating individual vertices. Now from the top, if we were to look at this from the top view, there'd be this obvious hole. So we want to kind of fill some blades of grass in there. So you can use the L key to select continuous meshes. So in this case it will only select this whole blade here. If we mouse over and hit L, you can select duplicate blades by also hitting L and mousing over the different parts. So I'm going to select this part and hit Shift D again, and then just duplicate that in there. It's intersecting with one of our previous blades, so again I'm going to move the vertices of this blade up a bit. Just freely rotate it, maybe scale it a bit. Like so. Move that up a bit. Like that. It's starting to look a bit more interesting. Now I think this one's a bit too tall and wide, so we'll just scale that down. Oops. Try and rotate this in some way. Sometimes doing this way can be a bit fiddly, but eventually you'll get there. And I'm just going to add one more blade here pointing this way. Not quite happy with how it's looking, but again you can spend a bit more time to get some nice results. You get something like that. So that's actually a little bit smaller than I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is actually just select all, just move it over a bit so it's roughly over the center of the pivot in edit mode. Then in object mode I can bring this up a bit, just see it in relation to the rest of our scene. Yeah, that looks quite nice. And again I'm just going to apply rotation and scale. And now we can basically just put snapping on, turn to increment, and we can just duplicate our grass around, make our scene a bit more interesting, and then obviously rotate each grass however we want. So yeah, so that's how you make the grass. Oh dear, they seem to have not snapped to the grid here, but we can just quickly remedy that. Oh dear. Just quickly snapping that to anywhere on the plane here. So, yep, that's how we create the grass, and I hope that's helped you, and I'll see you in the next video.